culture, aesthetics, spirituality, building materials, and community engagement. We believe that if you reference those 5 in your designs, you'll be creating authentic architecture according to a specific culture.
Nmadili Okwumabua is a cultural designer, urbanist, and educator in African architecture and urban planning. Her passion for design is rooted in a vision where communities in Africa and the diaspora are developed with new architectural languages that preserve heritage and are culturally and environmentally sustainable.
Has the word Afrocentric been in existence before it started moving, or?
Yes, indeed.
In 1999, she founded Southern Sahara USA, a research incubator for defining these new culture-informed design languages. The Community Planning and Design Initiative Africa, CPDI Africa, was birthed in 2014 in response to these efforts, launching the first ever Afrocentric architecture design competitions worldwide. Her work in African and Black culture architecture garnered global attention via her projects and lectures as a visiting professor, international design workshops, and the art of African architecture, a curated exhibition of winning designs from CPDI Africa biannual competition.
Why are we rich, but we appear not to be wealthy? Our communities are not built with the best materials. We appear to be poor. And we're poor because we're not building upon the knowledge, the science and technology that our forefathers had mastered. So everyone, I'm really glad to be here. My name is Nmadili Okwumabua. I'm the founder of CPDI Africa. That's the Community Planning and Design Initiative Africa. And I'm glad to be on the Architect's Corner here today with Chigozie.
Well, you're welcome to Architect's Corner. Thank you for honoring this interview, and we are grateful to have you. Well, for someone who just clicked on this video, I think we'll just get right into it. For someone who just clicked on this video and has never heard of CPDI Africa, they might just think, why should I care about architecture from the past? How would you describe what it is that you do, why you do it, and why anyone should listen at this moment?
Okay. It's fantastic. Thanks, Chigozie, for the question. And welcome once again to CPDI Africa.
Thank you.
All right. So you know a little bit about us already. CPDI Africa stands for the Community Planning and Design Initiative Africa. And our whole idea was to fast track the evolution of African architecture. How did we as Africans design and build the spaces that we occupied, all the way from the times of the pyramids before that and into the most recent past? What were our design philosophies? What made us great? How did we really build the masterpieces that the African continent is known for, or was known for? So the importance today is now, as Africa is being built, in whose image should she be built in? Naturally, we think it will be built in the image of the ethnicities, the nations, and the empires of Africa. In order for us to do that, we have to know where we're coming from, right? So, for example, what was traditional Igbo architecture? How were our communities designed and built? And if I'm moving around Igbo space today, what should I see? it should be modern Igbo architecture, modern Igbo masterpieces. If you're moving through Shekiri land, Idoma land, anywhere in South Africa, Zulu land, in the diaspora, African American land, what should I see? It should be architecture built upon the culture, the science, and technology of those people. That's what CPDI Africa is about.
What inspired you to start this initiative?
Okay, CPA actually got started one summer in 1994 when I attended a lecture by Professor Hughes, David Hughes, in the US, who was talking about his travels around the continent. He had won a Fulbright scholarship and he traveled Northeast, Southwest, Central Africa, capturing evidence of African architectural masterpieces that have been built on the continent. I was a young student in my 20s and I attended his lecture, and the inspiration was just born in me that day. I never knew that African architects were doing work that was unique to their own cultures. You know, in school we learn about Frank Lloyd Wright, Corbusier, we learn a lot about Western architecture, Asian architecture. We don't learn about the things that Africans are doing that's modern and indigenous to them. So I enjoyed his presentation and it just inspired me to respond to his challenge. What could I do? What could I design in my own experience, in my own journey through school and of course later in the profession? What could I design that was modern and celebrated my own culture and identity? So that was about 30 years ago. And that inspired me to start this journey of CPDI Africa. And not only for me to design buildings, but to invite architects around the world to join me in creating these new languages in African architecture.
It's quite interesting. And prior to this interview, I enjoyed the tour with around this place, and everything was just so interesting, from the materials to the designs to every single thing in this place. But then you often speak of new architectural languages for Africa. What do you mean by this, and why is redefining these languages important today?
Okay. Every culture, every society has their own architecture. I always like to say the easiest is when I describe Chinese or Asian architecture. The minute you see it, you know it. What identifies their built space? And the first thing you see is what you see, and it's the aesthetic. There's much more to architecture or anything than just the aesthetics. If somebody were looking at you and I, our aesthetic is brown. We are brown women. So they would naturally think, oh, they must be African, right? So your aesthetic tells you, is the first introduction to what you're seeing. But there's much more. Architecture reflects the spirituality, culture, and the geography, politics, economics, climate, the region. Architecture reflects all of these things into the built environment. So any region in the world, any society would naturally have an architecture that is specific to them. And it's important because they find it beautiful, it's affordable to them, it's built with their materials, it reflects their identity, it celebrates who they are. All of these things. And so every culture, every society should have their architecture. The same thing for African people. Right? So these things are very important for so many reasons. Yes.
Okay. Then at what point did you realize that the science and the value embedded in Africans' traditional architecture was at the risk of being lost?
Yes. So, like I said, when we go to school, most of our curriculums are Eurocentric. We learn everything that's going on in the West and now, of course, in Asia. We rarely learn what is important to us in Africa, which is one of the reasons why we have so many challenges in our built environment. And people talk about affordable housing. Why don't we have affordable housing? Okay, there are many reasons. Are we really playing our role in international economics? Are we really at the table? Africans are actually probably the wealthiest people because of the resources that we have, but we present as the poorest, right? We don't really control our resources. But if we did, then Africa would be built with, of course, amazing architecture, very affordable, and on. So I realized that something was missing when I tried to put those two things together. Why are we rich, but we appear not to be wealthy? Our communities are not built with the best materials. We appear to be poor. And we're poor because we're not building upon the knowledge, the science and technology that our forefathers had mastered. Like I like to say, the pyramids was only supposed to be the beginning. We should have built on from that. So what happened? So the lack of information, the lack of us not controlling our resources, what we are learning in school, all of those things equate to us losing track of the knowledge that we need to have and build upon. That's when I realized that we were in trouble and began to come up with these Afrocentric curriculums that I'm now teaching at CPDI Africa and our schools.
Okay. Has the word Afrocentric been in existence before it started the movement, or?
Yes, indeed. So Afrocentricity was actually started by a historian. He wrote on all things to do with Africa, but Afrocentric Architecture was coined by Professor David Hughes out of Kent State in Ohio. He's an African-American architect and professor who came up with this theoretical framework on creating architecture that is Afrocentric in nature, that it is inspired by the peoples and the culture and the sciences and the technology. And so that was back in the 90s, and with him being my mentor, of course, I've taken the baton and continued to run with it to popularize that word, Afrocentric architecture.
Okay, that's quite interesting. What are some examples of Asian traditional or Asian African architecture systems that you believe hold key to our future, both technologically, environmentally, or spiritually?
Okay. So the CPD Africa 5 elements of Afrocentric architecture or African-centered architecture are the lens that we work with at CPDI. Culture, aesthetics, spirituality, building materials, and community engagement. We believe that if you reference those 5 in your designs, you'll be creating authentic architecture according to a specific culture. So examples, the easiest always for most people in the built environment professions is materials.
Sure.
Right, so we know that our ancestors built with earth, with clay, some people call it mud, some people call it adobe. It is the material that is available to us on the continent, not only because it is available, it is actually the perfect material for our weather, our climate. It keeps out the heat. Africa is hot, so the last thing you want to do is build with materials that absorb heat. So building upon that science and technology, Nigeria's leading Afrocentric architect or Nigerian-centric architect is Dimas Wonko. He has perfected his materials. He's patented a clay brick that he uses in all of his buildings, and so his buildings are cool. There are other examples. I'll take you to the US for this example, and this is an example of aesthetics in architectural languages. The Museum of African American Culture and History in Washington, D.C., designed by Phil Freelon and two partner architects. The design for the museum was inspired by the Yoruba headdress, or we call it egele today in contemporary Nigeria. But they drew inspiration, their aesthetic inspiration for the building concept from an African headpiece, right? So that's another example. Spirituality, yes, most Africans today are either Christians or Muslims, but we also still revere some of our spiritual practices. I can give you some examples of that. And of course, community engagement, very important. How did we build? We did not build by looking for financing or begging for funding. We built with sweat equity. People came together when it was time to build a family or friend's house, and we spent time building it, and the reward was, food or drink. And when it's the next person's time, we all go and help. So that type of community engagement or sweat equity, as we call it, is how we build. Francis Carey, right now in Burkina Faso, is the champion of that element, calling the community together. I think I've touched, and culture. Culture is very important.
Sure.
There's so many ways that our culture is translated in our built environment. The one that I love talking about the most is courtyards. The fact that most of us on the continent, our relationship with the indoor-outdoors was paramount. Having those outdoor-indoor spaces where we gathered, taught our children, learned to pray, learned to do our chores, our homeschooling. That courtyard element was very important. And so we are starting to have more examples of architecture with courtyards in them as well. Okay?
That's interesting. But then I was thinking, while you were speaking, we mentioned culture, aesthetics, and what came to my mind was, what if our cities are filled with traditional architecture buildings? How would they look?
It's very beautiful. That's what I imagine every day is moving around spaces in Nigeria and just stopping and being in awe of the architecture. To me, everyone would be a masterpiece if we were actually translating our identity. For example, Abuja is Nigeria's shining new capital. It's built in Gbagi Gwari territory. That is the indigenous people of this area. So you'd imagine maybe Abuja could have been designed with Gbagi masterpieces, right? Paying homage to that culture. I can imagine driving through the east, which is where I'm from, and seeing Igbo monumental designs everywhere. It would be such a sense of pride, not only for us, but for others. You can imagine people coming to stare in awe at our buildings like they do the pyramids, right? And that's tourism, architectural tourism. So much good could come out of our built space if our designs really reflected who we are.
Okay, thank you for that. But then how can we ensure that Afrocentric architecture is preserved and promoted in the face of globalization? Because you mentioned that Western education is mostly built on the Western outline. So how can we preserve this in the midst of globalization and Western architectural dominance?
Two ways. There are two things that would trigger the importance of this conversation. One, global warming and sustainability. So everyone's talking about the planet is warming up. 40% of the heat is coming from our profession. Right? The materials that we use, whether it's in our buildings, in our road construction. So we're warming up the planet. The West is coming now to ask of Africans who were the original green builders, how could you help mitigate the situation? But because we have spent the past 50, 60 years from the independence era, learning from Eurocentric curriculums, we have not mastered our own green building technology. We haven't taken the time to, like I said, fast track the evolution of. So with global warming probably being the catalyst to encourage us to think inward and think green again, we could start, and that will reflect in the curriculums that we create. If we are designing Afrocentric curriculums, then we are ensuring that the future generation of architects and urban planners and developers and engineers and realtors, that they're really thinking from that perspective. They're thinking not just planet first, they're thinking of themselves first, their own comfort, their own joy in their own spaces. We should come out, we should be graduating built environment professionals who are experts in designing Afrocentric architecture, whether it's for the African continent or the diaspora, right? Buildings that are affordable, that are beautiful, that preserve identity and culture, that make your life easy, comfortable, you experience joy, all of those things. So yeah, respond to global warming and create new curriculums, and we will change this narrative.
Quite interesting. Ma, so
Yes.
talking about sustainability, which you just mentioned, how can African traditional architecture help in this climate change and all of this that are happening right now?
Okay. So there's two types of sustainability. One is powered by the people itself, right? So, like I always said, that there was no such thing as affordable housing in the past,
Sure.
because housing and land allocation came with citizenship. You're a member of a community. The chief or the king is going to assign land to you, to the men in the community, and so land was available. It was free. That's sustainable. There's plenty of land in Africa. Building our houses, palaces, shrines, our markets, whatever it is, was sweat equity. That is 1 point how many billion of us now. So there is manpower, right? So if we are building through sweat equity, that is very sustainable, right? Why are you looking for a job when there's actually work to do? We can actually build with our hands like we used to when architecture and construction was actually part of our culture. Everybody would design and build. It didn't cost anything, and you didn't need to get a degree after 5 years and all that. All right. So when we talk about sustainability, we can do that because we are here. We have the land, we have the materials, we have the strength, we should have the know-how. We can sustain that. The other topic of sustainability is the materials itself, which is what most people think about. It should be green, less carbon footprint. It should be locally sourced, standardized materials. All of those things we can do. I like saying that a typical thatch roof can last about 10 years. So why don't you take that same thatch into the lab in your school, in your engineering program or your architectural program? Take that thatch into the lab and modernize it, standardize it, create roofing sheets from thatch. It's the same material.
And after 10 years,
Either 10 years or 20 years, because you've improved upon it, replace it. So why not use a nice green material that is grown everywhere, harvest it? It's so easy when you think about it, right? But we have to be conscious, we have to be intentional about doing that. Taking our local materials, standardizing them, improving them, like what Dimas Wonko did with his earth bricks. He standardized them now. So now you can teach the artisans how to work with those materials. teach the architects how to create beautiful architecture using those materials. And then you can create sustainable architecture. But it's a process. We have to be intentional about it and start it.
You created platforms like CPDI Africa, GSA, let's say G Center or GSA.
The Global Studio for African-Centered Architecture.
Exactly. And the new CED, that's the Center for Afrocentric Design and Advancement.
Yes.
How do you see education, not just design, playing a role in decolonizing the built environment?
Education is key. Education is key. Like I said, when I was told that Nigeria started when Mango Park misrode and landed in Nigeria, what are we telling our children? How are we educating them? I feel like today we just simply send our kids to school to be lobotomized, for their brains to be removed. It sounds harsh, but it is a simple fact. If you send children to school from ages 2 or 3 to 25, if you're not teaching them what they should learn to help themselves and their families and their community members, their nations, when they graduate, then what are you doing? They're going to graduate with knowledge they can't use for different reasons, for so many different reasons. And I hate to use this, but it's basic. International racism, right, exists. So Africans don't even understand why we go to school and there are no jobs. We don't understand why we have all these resources, yet we are poor. And what we have is going out to the West, to Europe, to Asia, and they're using African resources to make money for themselves. So if you were learning that in school from age 3, my country has resources. I'm supposed to be in charge of those resources. This is what I should be doing with these resources in the lab in my school. I should be learning how to industrialize. I should be learning how to turn my raw goods into finished products for myself and for export. I should be learning how to create environments that are very comfortable, beautiful, and affordable to me. So education is everything. I have a master's in African studies, so I could talk on and on and on about this. But it was in my master's that I learned what happened to Africa. Why are we in this situation? Right? And so if everything that I learned in my master's program, I had been learning from age 3 and building upon it, that means every Black child in Africa would be like Thomas Sankara and Nnamdi Azikiwe and Tafawa Balewa and Walter Rodney, all our greats, Malcolm X, MLK, right? Every Black child would grow up knowing how to be empowered with the right information, stretching back to when we were in charge of ourselves. We were, how they say, kings and queens and scientists. When the West came to kidnap us, take us into slavery, they were not kidnapping farmers or savages. They were kidnapping scientists, politicians, moms, dads, engineers, kings, queens, children. They were kidnapping the best of our societies. And those people went and built the West. It's hard to think that Africans built America. Africans built the New World. Africans sponsored. So imagine if we were being taught all of this information right from our schools. We would graduate knowing so much. And Africa would be paradise. Not us always trying to japa to paradise that somebody has built using our resources, we would. But we don't know these things because we don't learn them in school.
Then can we learn them in school?
Our curriculums must change. Our leaders need to agree that it is important to educate the children, educate them, empower them. The youngest population, I think, in the world is the African population. That's a lot of young people who are waiting to do what? They don't even know where to start. No opportunities. So our leaders have to be intentional about putting Africa first, changing our curriculums, and creating that enabling environment. If there are no jobs, fine. When we graduate, give us the opportunity to create those jobs. Yeah. So our curriculums must change so that we train up a generation of leaders, educated, informed leaders.
When most of these African traditional architecture are not documented, how then can this knowledge be passed to the next generation?
So I think that we'll be surprised how much has been documented. It feels like a lot has been lost because yes, during the colonial era, most of our towns and cities were razed to the ground, and we had to build back up using materials that we imported from them, back then cement, and using their floor plans and their design philosophies. But there is a lot of evidence of who we were and what we built before those things were destroyed. The first place that I like to look is the books and the journals kept by the European explorers when they got here. It is very interesting to read their notes and look at their sketches, what they saw when they got here. The way they describe Benin City, Congo, Kumasi, Ghana. They said that Paris was like a ghetto. Paris was slums compared to the well-master planned communities in Benin City, our own base here in Nigeria.
Wow.
We can't even imagine, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. So what they wrote in their journals, the sketches that they made, so there's evidence there. There is evidence in some of our museums. Our historians have actually kept some artifacts and some stories. Our grandparents and great-grandparents, some of us still have parents and grandparents who can remember, especially those living in the rural areas. It's a matter of us sitting down and interviewing them, getting those memories from them before they're lost forever. Africa is also very large. Not everything has been erased. Going into the hinterland, going there and finding some buildings that are still standing, finding local master builders who still have that knowledge. Because after all, 90% of Africa is still living a very rural existence. They are closer to the truth of our identity than those of us in the city. So there's information, there's documentation, there's stories, there's sketches. Not all has been lost. So bringing all of that quickly to our classrooms and teaching, and then documenting more. With the little that I've done, I can imagine if all of us were doing what, yes, it's not all us.
Okay. So your work spans from Manana to Abuja.
Yes.
How has African diaspora responded to the call for Afrocentric architecture, and how can they reconnect with it meaningfully?
Wonderful question. So, being half diaspora myself, right? My mother is African American, my dad is Nigerian, and I've lived half my life in both spaces. The African diaspora is very interested and engaged in this conversation. One reason is because they are very interested in reconnecting back to their identity. Something that some could argue that we take for granted on ground in Africa. I know my village now. I know I'm a Robo or Shakiri, but they don't have that close memory. So they are eager to reconnect. So they are actually the ones that are championing a lot of this dialogue. Like I said, my mentor, Professor David Hughes, is African American. There are more Afrocentric projects that I know of being built in America than I know of in Nigeria. They're African towns, their buildings, their communities. And now with more travel coming to the continent, Africa is opening up to the diaspora. Even us in Nigeria, we're welcoming them till 30 December.
Wow.
Right? So that connection is getting stronger and stronger. And they are going to play a very important role in Africa redefining itself. I think the children of Africans who were left behind and the children of Africans who were taken away are going to come back together, and they're going to put the puzzle back together, and we'll be okay.
Thank you so much, Ma, for that response. But now, let's go into the practical aspect of this. Having watched the CPDI 10th anniversary documentary on YouTube, the documentary traces CPDI Africa's journey over the past decade. One question that evaded my mind was, what were some of the pivotal moments that shaped the organization's focus on Afrocentric architectural pedagogy?
Okay. Pivotal moments, I would say for me, on the first competition, you know how architects are. They wait till the last minute before doing their work or submitting their design or whatever. So that night when the competition was closing, I hadn't received anything, and by midnight it was supposed to be over. Like an hour before midnight, ding ding ding, my email started blowing up. I said, "Oh my God!" They were responding. Designs were coming in from all over the world. That was the first moment for me that I knew I was onto something. That designers were inspired. They found this to be an exciting challenge to write what I used to say the final chapter in the book of architecture, the African chapter, right? So ours was the first with the pyramids in Egypt or Kemet, and this will be the last. Okay, so that was a great moment that they actually submitted designs. People did research, they'd never come to Africa from Vietnam, from the Ukraine. Okay. And they sent in great stuff. The second moment that I knew we had done something good was when I now traveled the winning designs around in the exhibition, the Art of African Architecture exhibition. The audience would respond so favorably to the designs. They would say, "Oh, these are so beautiful. This is such a breath of fresh air. Where have architects been hiding these kinds of designs?" And I said, "Wow, we haven't been hiding them. Thank you for loving them." The only reason why you haven't been seeing such is because, again, we haven't been learning in our schools to create Afrocentric. So if given a chance, you will see these kinds of buildings everywhere. So thank you for loving them. It was a great pivotal moment, because if people had said, "This is so savage and primitive. Nmadili, how could you do this? This is so ugly. These designs are so retarded." If they had said that, then I'd have known I failed. And that the myth that Africans can only do mud hut and thatch roof would have been true, that we can't think architecturally. So the audience response was another successful moment. There have been a few others, the launching of our school, and then of course the careers of our mentors, David Hughes and Dimas Wonko. Their careers just exploding again on the scene, the awards, the recognition, and the fact that now Afrocentric is in everybody's mouth, whether it's in architecture, fashion, food, film, whatever, Afrocentric. I can watch TV now and just see the fruits of our labor. So I know that we've made an impact. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then, while you were speaking, something came to my mind. As an educator, what does the courses on CBDI look like?
Okay, on our online platform, the Global Studio for African-Centered Architecture, CPDIAfrica.org, we have classes in history and theory, so theoretical frameworks, starting with the works of Professor Hughes, Dimas Wonko, and so many other thought leaders. So students, professionals can go there and learn about the history of African architecture. You can also learn about the architecture that's coming from African ethnicities,
Okay.
right? So you can go there now and see on Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, Sudanese architecture, Kenyan architecture. The goal is that you'll be able to go there one day and put in your own ethnic group and see courses about that architecture. So we have history and theory, we have culture-specific architectural classes, and then we also have our design studios. The design studios come in the form of internships, right? So anybody who takes our studio, the challenge is simply to take your own culture and design a new prototype. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that response. What are some overlooked but high impact career paths in Afrocentric design movement that today's architects should be exploring?
Oh my goodness, good one. The first thing I would say, an easy, fun one is hospitality. In hospitality, that's one area you kind of should have the freedom to express yourself.
Right.
Like, for example, the Hilton or the Sheraton in Nigeria should not look like the one in New York,
Sure.
right? So in hospitality, if people are coming for tourism, they're coming to a space, they should experience something that is unique to the culture of their destination, right? So I would say if you're going to do hospitality architecture or museums, now that Nigeria, Africa is starting to receive, hopefully permanently and not on loan, the artifacts that were stolen during the era of slavery and colonization. So lots of museums are now being built. That's another good area to have that Afrocentric background, like the museum that's being built in Benin City right now. Folks in Togo and Benin, they are moving forward. They are rebuilding all their museums and shrines and palaces. It's a great opportunity right now to be an Afrocentric architect in some areas. Burkina Faso, Francis Carey's place, Niger, Miriam Kamara's place, of course, South Africa, Kenya, hopefully Nigeria, right? So museums, hospitality, I would go as far as also saying restaurants. The food industry is very successful here, it's thriving. So we should be doing restaurants that are themed as well. We would take our students on excursions. One of the favorite ones this last time was a Hausa-inspired restaurant. It was everyone's favorite destination during our trip. Yeah. So you can imagine going to eat Igbo food in a fancy Igbo restaurant that's designed, etc., etc. And then of course residential always. But residential, might take a little bit more time because you need the clients to be proud and in tuned to allow an architect to do something very unique for them. Unless you're very proud of your culture, then fine. But if not,
because I don't know how many clients would want their buildings to look traditional. Most times clients will say, you see that one that my brother did, I want something like that.
yes, yes. It's really important for us to get a few examples standing. Like you can imagine if some celebrities, if their houses were inspired by their culture, oh my goodness, it will become a trend immediately.
True,
Right?
true.
So they need some examples.
Okay. Then how do we start those examples?
We have to make noise, we have to entice them, we have to showcase some things to them and see what can be done.
Okay.
It's on the books right now.
Okay. Then going back to pedagogy, when you talked about having different ethnic groups, their culture and architecture, and all of that, what came to my mind was in Nigeria, where we have several ethnic groups, how do you marry all of this? How do you cope?
Okay. So people have asked, what is Nigerian architecture?
Exactly.
Okay. So first of all, Nigeria is not a real. Nigeria is a construct by the British Empire. They just drew a line around 250 ethnicities, nations, proper nations were there, and now we've been given supposedly one identity. It's not real. It's not. So what there is in Nigeria, there is Igbo architecture of Nigeria. There is Urhobo architecture of Nigeria. So creating these design languages, I think that to be true to ourselves, Pidgin is a language that we all speak as Nigerians, and I think it has little bits of different ethnicities. So we could create a Nigerian architectural language that has a little bit of, that could be an interesting challenge. When you want to talk about authentic, real identity, no, there's Igbo, there's Urhobo, there's Nupe, there's Idoma, distinct, and they're not interested in mixing all their stuff to form a new language. They have their food, they have their fashion, they have their spirituality, they have their language, they have their architecture.
Basically, those 5 elements.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you for that response. Now, looking into the future, what is your boldest dream for the future of African built environment? And what do you need from the next generation to get there?
Okay. You're asking me what do I see in my mind?
Exactly.
Where do I actually live? I live in my mind and what I see. Is in Nigeria, is in Africa. That is just beautiful. I don't know if that's just a word that everybody wants to resonate with. They might say it's shallow, but it's not. Beauty encompasses so much. Beautiful. You know how they say spaces can influence your mood?
Right.
If you're in somewhere that is designed poorly, bad light, materials are chipping, falling, cracking, everywhere is dark and discouraging, it's depressing. Beautiful architecture will have the opposite effect on you. So I see a built environment that is beautiful, which means that it's well designed, well planned, well built, affordable, right? And that will be achieved by future architects who have gone through this pedagogy, this training. these curriculums that are Afrocentric, that put themselves at the center of the conversation. How do I grow up, get married, have a family, take care of my family? If my system is broken, I can't afford all those things, and I cannot afford a house. I cannot afford architecture, because that's really the highest price ticket item on anybody's list of responsibilities. So the system has to be fixed so that we can afford, design and build the communities that we want, that make us happy, and give us dignity.
For instance, when you talk about the materials in traditional architecture, are these materials still readily available in our Nigeria today? For instance, the bamboo, the round earth, and all of that.
The materials are here. We're just not utilizing them. They are there. We can plant trees and harvest bamboo or timber. We can plant if it's intentional.
Yeah.
The Asians are doing it, right? They're using bamboo now for everything. Plant the trees. And one of my favorite slides in one of my presentations is this Asian lady in her kitchen. Outside of her window is just bamboo growing.
Wow.
She's growing her building materials. We can all think. So grow the building materials. The earth is still here. There's laterite everywhere. There are stones. Abuja is known for its granite and its stones and its rocks. They are materials. We just have to be intentional about harvesting them and using them. Of course, population control could be an issue one day if we continue to, but even that, with planning, government policy and master planners and architects working together, can resolve things.
Okay. Thank you so much for that response. What specific African building technology or philosophies could we adopt globally to solve issues like climate change, just the way you mentioned earlier? What technologies or philosophies should we adopt? Or even displacement or community disconnection?
The global warming, it's just, as I go back to green materials. That's why they are giving themselves perks, for building green, being LEED certified, and all those things. They're trying to encourage themselves to do right by nature. And Africans who were the original green builders, what are we doing? So it's just to be intentional. It's just to be intentional. We have schools of architecture and construction in every state in Nigeria. That should be our focus. The same way how this university, African University of Science and Technology, created by Mandela, for us to have spaces, centers of excellence, to find African solutions for African challenges. Just be intentional. That should be every university's motto and mission and objective. Solutions for our problems.
Okay. For any young architect or young designer or a student watching this video, what do you say to them concerning our identity and all of this?
Be proud of who you are. It sounds strange, maybe. You shouldn't be proud. Be proud of who you are. Be thankful for who God made you and who God made as your ancestors. Get to know them. Get to know their wisdom. Go and find out. Find out who your people are. Find out what they contributed to their societies. Find out their science and technology, their design philosophy, their spirituality, morals, simple things. Find out who your people are. I think we were better in the past than we are now. Get that information. Bring it back to your everyday experience. Be proud of who you are. You're going to find a lot of wealth in your own culture that's going to have value to you. It could have value to your community. It could have value to your country. Of course, your country has to be welcoming of those things. right? Find out who you are, celebrate your culture and identity, showcase it in your profession. It will make you stand out. You will not be copy and paste. You will be original. That's my advice.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that advice. And before we wrap up this section, I would love to ask, what's the most important thing about your work, your mission, or even Afrocentric architecture that we haven't discussed but should have? And if someone was watching this video and had one burning question in their mind, what do you think that question would be?
For the Nigerians, how do I use it to make money?
Exactly. How is all of this going to translate to money?
Right? Okay, so that's the best one yet, right? So I always say that if what we're talking about doesn't have any value, if you cannot solve anybody's problem, please I beg, leave it. Let's go and do something else. So I challenge all my architects and all CPDI committee members. Find a solution to a problem that we are having today in this our contemporary life. See if you can find a traditional solution that can be applied today to solve that problem. The minute you can do that, you're going to make money. But it's not about money. You're going to make people's lives so much better. Just the fact that I say that there was no affordable housing problem in the past.
Right.
Why? Because in our culture, architecture and construction was part of our daily practice. So every young man who's starting a new life, the family and friends help him to build his house. When the next person's turn, we all go and help. So it wasn't about looking for money, looking for mortgage, looking for rent, borrow money from the World Bank. Just imagine if we brought that simple idea back. That means you will have a house. It means I will have a house. Free and paid for now, today. Every African would have a house because there's land. And we have our strength and we know how to make the blocks, the bricks. Even if it's cement, we know how to make it. So that is an African concept of community engagement, sweat equity that will save us. So if there's no value in what our ancestors did, then, but if there's value, bring it. My final story will be Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, an American, white American, visiting the Congo in the 1940s on a missionary trip as a Christian. And while in his hotel, he saw this Congolese family. They were helping each other to build house. So he's watching. After they finished building the house, big party, say thank you, food and drinks. He said, what? He carried that idea back to Atlanta, 1940s, and started Habitat for Humanity. What is Habitat for Humanity? Today it is the #1 housing organization in the world, $1 billion. Habitat for Humanity started out by Millard saying, everybody in the church, people should donate land, and all of us will donate our energy. We're going to go out and build 20 houses for 20 families in the church that are in need of housing. And they built. And they would dash them. They had a small mortgage that they had to pay, but it was so small because the land was free. The materials were donated by companies for tax write-offs. The labor was free because it was all the church members. So the money was very small. And in the Bible it says if a man owes you more than 7 years, forgive him his debt. So Habitat became the #1 housing developer in the world, going around the world helping people to build houses. Of an African concept. So that means all of us that went to design school, urban planning school, and our friends, is it your turn? So all these ones that we are doing 419 or doing all manner of horrible things in the name of looking for rent or jack buying because we think we can't afford a house in Nigeria, in Africa. All those things we go because in our culture we brought it back that we, the community, will build our houses, our markets, Why am I going to class and sitting in the classroom for how many years and coming out and do job when I could do that and still help myself and my friends build their houses and so many other things? We would have stressed. Our ancestors had sense. It's today that we're operating in a capitalist system that was forced on us, that does not work for us. Otherwise, every Nigerian will have a job. Why don't we have a job? We went to school. Why are we going to school? There's no money. Right? So there's a big so anyway, that's my final story for today.
Okay. All right. Something came to my mind when you were speaking. You've mentioned Japa like countless times in this video, and I was just thinking, are you saying the young Nigerian or the young African cannot go out and gain the knowledge, probably come back, or even do the Japa thing?
So Japa means to escape or to leave Africa, to move to Europe or America for greener pastures. Japa, that's what that means. You're saying can't they go and come back?
Yes, come back to their place, or you see that what they are going there to learn, we already have it here.
They're going to a society that is developed, that works, that has rules and regulations, that have strong economies. So they can go there, get a job, earn money to take care of their families. That's why they're leaving. They're not seeing those opportunities at home in Africa. They don't understand why they struggle to go through school. They graduate and there are no jobs. They don't understand, and this is not architecture, but it's tied into architecture because, like I said, broken societies. They don't understand that the agreements that our leaders made with the Western colonial powers when they were leaving was that Africa would stay under-industrialized. We're not allowed to produce our own raw goods. They come here, take our raw goods, manufacture them, use them there, and sell them back to us. So we don't understand that we are not really independent yet. It was on paper, it's not on fact. It's a tough one. Like I said, I have a master's in African studies, so I know why Africa is in this situation. And if nobody on ground in Africa understands what's happening to them, why they are struggling, it's not their fault because they're not learning it in school. So I know the agreements that African leaders have with the West. We go to school to learn to live in a society that we don't have in Africa. That society is abroad. Go there and get the job doing whatever you learn in school in Nigeria, and they will pay you for it and you have a better life if they allow you into their country. But here, no. No.
But then some of these histories, we don't study them in our Nigerian curriculum.
No, I don't know what faculty in Nigeria would teach what I'm talking about. I don't know. Even basic history has been removed from the curriculums. Yeah. So we just need to teach the truth in our schools, understand the role that Africa is playing in international politics and economics. Understand the role Africa is playing. So you know the cap. This is how far you can go as an African or in Africa, because the rest of the world this is where you're supposed to be, so that they can continue to live, how we say, their best life on your resources. And that brings us to what's happening in Burkina Faso with Ibrahim Traore, etc., right? Okay, so if the average African student is aware of these kinds of things, then he can make different decisions when he's going to school or when he graduates. Okay. And until political structures change and we have better deals, negotiation power with the Western nations. Until that changes, all we have is what we have on the ground, our materials, our body, any memory and knowledge. If we can put those things together, then we can build societies. We can build societies that we can actually build, not the ones that we are wishing for and can't because we don't have the funding. It's back to money, right? We don't have the funding. My country has gold, oil, diamonds, whatever. But where is the money? So until that money comes, sit down and think about what you have and what you can do. How can you leverage the knowledge that your ancestors had to build their empires before gold, diamond, oil, coltan, and all those things, copper. For all those things, what were we doing? Go back there and figure that out and build Africa from that knowledge.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this section. You've explored our minds. Now we'll go back to think, okay, how do we get it right? Where do we start from? And all of this. Thank you so much for being on Athletes Corner. And it also tells us that politics and all of this also has an influence in our society as much as it has in our built environment. So thank you again and again. We obviously will have you back sometime because I'm sure that this conversation, there are lots more to.
There's more.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Chigozie.